an educator and running the residency program and instructing together with Stephen, Paul, Stephen, here in our audience. Thank you so much for making this program a reality and for thank you to our supporters as well for the contribution to the architecture culture space and the residency program contribute to. We are here at C Space in Rhinebeck. This is the hinge space between the new gallery extension with a show by James Cassidier. And James had also lectured just last week for this residency series. And in between the models, archive, and the practice of Steve and Paul, as you just walked in, I would like to welcome you, John.
Thank you.
There's John Rajchman is a philosopher, and he has been teaching as an esteemed professor at Columbia University, teaching on art, critic theory, and also writing extensively on French philosophers, Foucault and Deleuze, amongst others. And we're very happy and fortunate to have you here. The title of your lecture is The Times of Correlation, Building from Here, right? And I think we're very fortunate to have you contribute to that theme of correlations, which is what the residency this year has been grappling with and responding to through your designs in the last 3 weeks. Welcome and
thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Stephen, Dimitra, the whole P-State team to extend this invitation. That I have to say, I started thinking in particular about the idea of correlation itself. And I became interested in what I call correlation fields. When Kiesler during the war, he came here with his wife, and he was for several years the director of the laboratory for correlations at Columbia. And there he talked about the relationship among space, people, objects, and concepts. There's a little bit this idea of a correlation field that brings together a number of different things in a rather free way that allows for invention. So this is what I call the time of correlation. Yeah, my idea is that correlational fields, they occur at particular times. And so that was my starting point. So if correlation fields occur in particular moments at particular times, how then do they end and live on after? So that's a problem. So there's kind of very rich periods where you have lots of exchanges and everything, but at some point those things end. And the question is, how do they live on after? And that leads to the problem, what is correlations today? What is correlations at our time? Which we know is a very fraught and uncertain, unsettling. So for that last part of it, hello, I wanted to bring in a recent connection. I guess I should say, as Dimitra said, I myself have drawn into these correlation fields at a period in New York where there was a conference called Any New York that was a global symposium every year in a different global city, many architects. And they wanted to invite somebody who was a non-architect to participate and for the relationship among space, people, objects to be the concept of that. And so it was a very rich moment that drew in many people and led me to have many ongoing connections. And one of those connections came very recently from a photographer named Wolfgang Timm. So Wolfgang Timm, he's a photographer who recently had a retrospective exhibition in MoMA, and he seemed very much, and he contacted me. He was worried that that exhibition in MoMA was, since it was a retrospective, posed for him the problem: how do I go on from here? No, and he then the gallery, he'd shown it, he was there, the gallery contacted me and said, would you be willing to participate with this person to not so much to write about them, but to work together to create some kind of field in which there would be these kind of discussions. And so that was the beginning of a lot of exchange with this whole thing. And I'm sorry for this very long aside. And in the course of this, Clemens himself changed. Clemens was a German photographer who was born in 1968, which for our generation was an important day. And he was gay, so he was in this community. We heard all this great music that brought him to London. So his work was based in Berlin and London. So while he was German, he thought of himself as a European. And while he was there, he was very much involved with the music scene, the electronic music scene, and also the gay community. So it was a kind of very interesting moment for him. And when he had this retrospective, he said, this moment is over. How do I go on from here? How do I build? And in our exchanges, we have these ongoing exchanges. He recently released an album, because he himself is a musician, that's called Build From Here. And I wanted to show a clip at the end of the lecture, 3-minute clip from that work.
And we have it. We'll play it.
Well,
We play.
yeah, you'll.
Yeah.
And it's entitled "We Are Not Going Back." We are not going back. The larger theme, therefore, building from here is that there's very rich moments of exchange, the times of correlation. They end, new ones start. There's a transfer of one time of correlation to the next. And in my case, as Dimitri was saying, I was suddenly drawn into this larger field. It was my relationship to correlations into this field of architecture and many architects, to which I had many connections and still ongoing connections, including this recent one with Tillmans. And yet, all that seems like an earlier phase in my work. If you're willing to path, I published in 1998 a book called Construction that has the things that I wrote, many of the things that I wrote during this period, so you can see what all that looks like. So that's a little bit the sense of my title. So there's different kinds of correlation. They live on. They get transferred, as we're transplanted, maybe you can say, to another zone. And we now no longer live in that incredibly rich period of other people, Stephen himself, in this incredible moment. And yet, it is a very rich moment. And we want to know house to live on. So that's the theme building from here. So, okay, I wanted then to just say that when I was going into this field, I have been working with the philosopher Gilles Deleuze. And Deleuze, at that time himself, because Deleuze was part of a great group of French philosophers, sometimes called post-structuralism, structuralism, that grew up my friends. But during this period, Deleuze himself had retired. And so he was on his own and working on his own. And it's then that I told him that I was involved in this architecture project, in any architectural project. And we had a common friend called Aurelio, who had facilitated this. Aurelio, as we know, was a French architect that worked with Jean Bell and also with Pecan and so forth, and was very much involved in media and art and so forth. Aurelio, therefore, facilitated this connection with the Eddy conferences and this group of people in the past. So I wanted to evoke a little bit that circumstance. For me, there's many concepts in Deleuze. For example, what a multiplicity is, what a agencement and arrangement and assemblage is, that sound like correlation. It's like his output from the idea of correlation. And so that's a little bit my philosophical prejudice related to this problem. And during this period, we therefore started to invent new ways of working together and new kinds of correlations. The Timon's connection alerted me to a very interesting part of this larger field, which has to do with the connection between territory and music. It's a very interesting problem in its own right. And in my collaboration with England, they published a little tablet, and we did one called Enlightenment, to go to the Gregory and Keeler's office. It had the philosopher many people like that, and Unical Hard, great architectural features, but we were very much interested in the problem of music, and earlier very much interested in the problem of music notation and dance, and so that led to many interesting kinds of intersections. And so it was a way of doing philosophy as a non-architect, addressing thinking in architecture that philosophy has need and to which it's addressed. So that was kind of my way into this larger field. And so it was a time of correlation for me that I think of as in some way over. We no longer have that great world in New York that we all in at this time, and yet it still remains a resource. And so that's the problem. How do we deal with compete? That's my larger theme. So I wanted to make context about Keithler himself. So Keithler, he came to New York, as we know, from Vienna, and there was wife in the 20s, before assuming this position. He's not alone among people in this very rich and interesting moment in Vienna that left Vienna in many ways under duress and came in many cases to America and to New York. And that brought with them this incredible culture that had existed already in Vienna. And in Vienna in particular, for the case of Keithler, he was very interested in this valuable need of Berger, shown. He collaborated others from Lowe's. For me, those very interesting were mentioned Wittgenstein, so there's the kind of concept thought of this logic integration. So not to remind everybody that it was a very rich time, which he definitely saw as music. Particularly thoughtful music was part of our configuration. And then Keithler came during the war, including 1743, and he was director of the laboratory for population design in London. I think what he did at Columbia exceeded the immediate purposes of that design system. That idea of correlation to the film, and he was very much interested in developing the concept. And this program shows how much that idea can live on and be taken up in other ways. And so that's the first question. You have times of correlation where things are brought together. I think without a prior frame or story that pre-given, that organizes them, they're brought together in a field of relation that allow for inventions, that mobilize energy, that bring very different kinds of people in contact. That's what I call a time of correlation. And then this is an example of how that situation, very dramatic situation, because of the war, and how this earlier moment got transplanted and transferred to New York. Keithler himself, his wife became unwell and so and so when he died, he had gone to Jerusalem he left this correlation of project. And in many ways, New York itself, which became this incredible center, in particular for architecture. People from any of all companies, from the Institute of Architecture in Urban Affairs, New York, which was an extraordinary space of experimentation and discussions and things as well. That earlier rich needs moment had been brought to Columbia in New York, and then thanks to what was going on in New York, started to happen in New York. So, for example, of times of correlation, they bring together, they usually use larger field, and then they die down and they are taken up later. And it's my sense that this great rich period that we lived in New York is itself no longer something that you can simply rely. It itself is something now that is challenged by the new choices. Therefore, the problem, how do we deal with it here, is we can no longer simply say, oh, we'll continue in the way we used to and all that. We have to think, what's happening now? What are coalitions today? What is it they're going to build from here? Maybe one way of thinking of this problem. And in the case of the work that I said earlier, he had stopped teaching his last lecture, which incidentally was about virtual and 5 minutes in the row, so then music and architecture stuff. So he was therefore on his own, wasn't well, and he had a problem with lung and so forth. So it was then that he produced a film that he said would only be shown after his death. That's not what's called the Wood A to Z. I think it was in English, and you can see it in the second. And it's in that film that he says there are rich periods and poor periods. And we, my generation of France, lived through the rich period, which has now come into a poor. And what's terrible about poor periods is you forget that there ever was. So you need to rethink and reinvent what had gone before. And so there's something about time of correlation that fits with this rich period, poor period. It's as though this great moment of Annie, which was architecture in Europe, that brought me in contact with this, and in particular with the extraordinary role that architecture itself played during this period. Because in the 90s, as we know, the digitalized and globalized forces that transformed architecture that led up to building China and other places and so forth. That's a little bit a circumstance that led me to this ability. And so Delacy was therefore in Paris. I used to go see him, and I said to him, together with Paul Willio, we created something in New York called Annie, Architecture in New York, and we're producing conferences and so, that sounds very interesting, and so on. And so, so I showed him our publications. My publication, for example, has an introduction by the part of a series that any corporation produced. He said, oh, this is very interesting. Perhaps the future will come from architecture, will come from this connection. So it was the beginning of his interest in this formation. He said later that people told him that they didn't like the horizon, but I don't know about that. But it showed this kind of moment of transition that in which this larger moment had occurred. So that's another vocabulary. There are rich periods and poor periods. What's terrible about the poor periods, you forget there was a rich period. Melissa's example is what happened during the October Revolution in Russia, and how that event became compromised. So, that's little story, therefore, that gives you context to this problem of building from Nanaho. So, the Viennese culture that I evoked earlier was and the role of music and architecture in that Viennese culture became of interest after the war, also in France, and in particular in Paris. So it's they started to this same, and among the figures that were involved in that rethinking of Paul Klee, the Bauhaus, the many things that have gone on in that early was something named Pierre Boulez. So, and Boulez was a conductor and a musician. I won't say that his work was the most interesting important work, but he had an extraordinary role for that generation, for the role of these formations for thinking, for ideas. So, for example, Boulez was very interested in the musical distinction between striding spaces and smooth spaces. That's a kind of musical argument. And you could, if you turn to the book 1,000 Plateaus from Deleuze and whatever, there's a section with smooth and striding spaces. You see the extraordinary way that idea got expanded into many very interesting architectural experiments in the areas and so forth. So, and the 1,000 Plateaus is the book that's maybe Deleuze's most correlation like that. It starts with something called the rhizome. So you see that things are not growing like trees and roots, but spreading out and so forth. Chaperon, the smooth and striated quilt. It's quilts are things that are connected by them and thread. Also, this guy mentioned that vote interested in physics and having this kind of moment of connection. And so there is in that book, one plateau called micropolitics and segmentarity. And it shows a painting called Men in the City, a painting by Vision from the city that's owned by Moses. And you see in that, that's connected also to paintings, but you see all of the a painting like Broadway to the Woody and the work where you see larger sorts of connections. But it's there that there seems to be an interesting kind of connection to this that independent Pisa was involved with. The Pisa himself, the whole architecture in creating theater and stages and all of that in those things already moving images so and part of this Frank retrospective in the same period I can do but who knows himself very interested in thought Paul Klee, if you look at the music and Paul Klee himself is an incredible musician. And he's very much involved with the music character of the relationship. He was in the workers. He was also in the Bauhaus. And the others like there's some things that Paul Kelly had been for said in this capacity. The first is that art doesn't reproduce what we can already see. It makes it something that we can't. And second, in the Bauhaus, for this transformation, the people are still missing. There's no real popular support for this. Those two phrases, the corporate man, the people is missing, and the role of art is to make visible are key moments that thanks to this U.S. formation were extracted from this earlier period. And therefore, connects to these larger ideas, and I think in some ways the thing on there. And so, I guess wanted to add maybe to these ideas that there's a role that the arts play in the correlation of people. And that role has to do with making visible, as things from showing that we already see, making songs that the music and what we read. The problem of likeness, that's the piece of this that I extracted. And this period when we worked with Ray Lane, there is an example of this, because it has to do with it's a phrase of the philosopher Nietzsche, and it has to do with the Wagner-Nietzsche relationship, a very complicated relationship. And in many ways, Nietzsche tried to get away from what and in some ways, his book, What Thus Spoke Child History, is a kind of philosophical opera, anti-Wagner. And it's there that this idea of likeness in terms of, since Nietzsche said he was very interested in the moment where the earth becomes light. The earth, the earth becomes light. It's a moment where all the stones and border with the dividers fly up in the air. And there's a moment of fundamental deterritorialization. So it's the moment in this exchange, this French exchange, that was so important. So there was Nietzsche scholar and also a scholar of Nietzsche in France, with a complicated German-French story about Nietzsche. So that's the piece of it that we reproduced in the likeness issue, and led to a separate publication, likeness theory. Is that all and retrospective connections that this great problem, rethinking correlations, started with the way thinking intersections with all of this. I wanted then to say a little bit more about the 10 months themselves. So, as I said earlier, he's photographer, or became a photographer. I think he's great that this has very well coincide with this, that it seems here in your discussion, photography. And so yes, I live in Germany. There's a group, a British group, of which one of the members of the Rhinebeck village, that inspired him to go to London. And it's there that we set up. I think David Werner, for example, he represents also Gerhard Richter. But Gerhard Richter is an earlier German information. Richter also is this incredible relationship with the photo that contains their own biography, sort of an incredible earlier way of a German person who has lived through the war, that goes to the war academy. Construction very different. So it's this post-Cold War period, everything like that. The wall has come down. He goes to London, but in London he maintained his offices. Berlin, so he's already in more than one place, and it's there that he starts the process that become the invention of his own way. He started to take pictures and so he strikes me something very much himself, a correlation with the model, because in his practice, in taking the story there's different media, there's digital and analog, there's also moving images and still images, everything connected to this core photography, like spread out into this imagery. So, it's again a case where he doesn't himself use the word correlation, but he fits with this interest that I have in correlation with time and how they arise and how they live on and why we have to think about correlation now and therefore building here. So in 2022, which is 2 years ago, the MoMA, the started MoMA, did an enormous retrospective of the Chilimanos. That's called and Chilimanos himself, when you have a retrospective, it's great because people remember you, but you're also enclosed in what you have and so you want to participate in this, but to think of what else you can do, so you're not limited to the thing that the retrospective should. And it's there that in that catalog that Tillmans has a number of things that are connected to the themes that we've been talking about. First, he says that I make picture in order to see the world, which is never seen. And what's interesting to me in the larger coalition fields in which my photography occurs is the act of art of seeing itself. In this retrospective, uh, uh, there was they produced a very big catalog, and and immediately after, that's how I knew the story. David's Vienna Gala contacted me with a very unexpected and strange invitation. Would I be willing to work with Wolf on not so much the writers, but to create with him as a some kind of new moment. Because Tillman's had been busy at that moment. A number of exhibitions that would take place later in Europe. And so I said, sure, it sounds terribly interesting. And so Zwirner produced a separate show, immediately following one at the moment, that had the title Full Week. So it was Tillman's title. So he wanted to fold himself in the way. So it was part of the connotation of it. And the full part of it, Stephen remembers, I'm sure, during the end conferences, what is it to fold in architecture? An enormous discussion, many people taking. So that little fold me part of architecture taught somehow to deal with this fold project. And so there's a very interesting review. So I said yes. I went to see the Pullman show that David Zwirner, and then they sent me many Tillman's tapes. I shouldn't say I remember very much, because I hadn't been involved myself, particularly in my direction. And Peter Eisenman wanted me to take part in the anything. At the end, I'm training but no worries. And somebody arrived, many tailors of the work of Peter Eisenman. So it was a little bit like that. Suddenly, this very rich story of Clement and the catalog. There was one that interested me in particular, that took place in Dublin, in Scotland, space for Greece, where I have lots of contacts myself, and so forth. Was very interesting. So I therefore started to follow, let's say, what was happening with Tillman, to the idea that we were going to. But since 2022 until now, many things have happened. The world is maybe not in the same state as it was in the first book to this. So there's a very interesting review of the show that Roxana did at the moment. That says that there's something very sad about the show. That we felt that there was a kind of loss that seems to. I guess I should say that in months, so he went to London, and he therefore was part of this. He's very unhappy with Brexit, and thought himself very much as a new kind of global European. But so he was therefore in London, for this thing, came to New York for a year. And it's there that we met somebody in the New York Times, who was a German painter, and they became popular. And this Joyful McFine got AIDS, and from him 2 months ago. And so he took all those medications. So there was something sad, and therefore there's a sense of loss. So many people have died of AIDS. And Jason Ferraro himself gave Times critic, and therefore wrote up this exhibition saying there's something sad, so 2 months can't continue like this. You can't go on like this. It was so there was a kind of crisis in many aspects of this work, and that's why this full it seemed a kind of interesting moment, sort of personal moment for him, but one that was very much connected to things that were going on. So since then, 2 months, I guess I should say, was himself always built up in the final bit. 2 months, was from the start something he made music. And he was very much part of this sort of technological electronic music. He tried on loved it. And but he thought himself as primarily a photographer, not a musician. So during this period, for whatever reason, the Tillmans decided he would have come out as a musician to say that making music was an integral part of his work, and not just, as he says, second fiddle music. So, and it's then that he released an album called Build It from People. And that album includes a portion it's accompanied by a video. He works with, still not with sort of videographer in Berlin, office in Berlin, who makes videos and films. So they produced this film called Build in Here. They've released this film, Build in Here. And if you're really interested in you can buy the album. Buy the album. The album cover has an incredibly architectural focus, in the sort of building and music slide of all of this. So it's a second album. He had already put out another album. He worked with something Frank Ocean, who also produced a book called Endless Company. So important. And so he has recently, so this project was shown in Hong Kong, was here at the gallery in Hong Kong. This project was shown, and for the first time, music dominates how they present Tillman's work to this audience, therefore, in Hong Kong. And so that's the bit of all this that I thought would be interesting to show. And in particular, you can see all of this on YouTube. If you don't want to do that, you can just get it on YouTube. It's the piece called "We Are Not Going Back" that I wanted to there in the ship. And Tillman, here's an interview about what he means by "we are not going back," how he came to do this. And he said that it's against the, I'm quoting him now, the cognitive dissonance between what people say and what people do. For example, find Trump objectionable, and still vote. And he says, another quote, it's about the forces that want to undo us, undo liberal society. I mention all of this because by a remarkable coincidence, "We Are Not Going Back" is now slowly become habits that you can have in order to get "We Are Not Going Back" a t-shirt. So come on, wasn't worried about that, but it was this kind of strange intersection between all of that. And then, so for this video, and therefore produced on this occasion, working with this guy, Michael Hampstead, who's the videographer in Berlin. They included, or he decided to include, amateur footage that was made by his grandfather that had been shot in New York in 1939 and then in Germany in 1940. In other words, before and after the war. It's there that you see this kind of personal aspect of his story. We are not going back, but Finland is saying, I'm not going back. This is my family. This is how. Maybe we can just therefore show
It's gonna.
So I guess by way of conclusion, I think that I was very interested in this idea of time correlation. The time correlation arise in which periods would survive, process through which we survive, that leads us to the problem, what's correlations now? For this correlations now, maybe it's interesting to look at this problem. We are not going back, building a year of which this is one example.
We can,
John, I'm glad you mentioned the thousand. Yeah, because I think in a certain sense, that book, which I still have a dog here, probably in the desk downstairs. But other than that, like it better is the ideas of correlation, but they just take on a different text. They take on a different word. Then years ago, 10 years ago, in fact, it was something that 11 years ago, I was in this competition for the Museum of Natural History in Los Angeles. And I said, what you need is not a board tree up there. I need to read the museum with a rhizomatic order. And we won the competition against Foster or Philosopher because of the idea, not a rhizomatic order. But my question to you is, you lose. That book was written by Waterloo. They wrote it together. Did you ever read Waterloo? Yes, and no, I knew Waterloo fairly well. He very much participated in all of this. He went to the big schools and everything. It's a very different kind of figure. He had a practice in the south of France in the mental hospital at La Bourg. And I was very friendly also, because I went down to see him there. And one thing that's interesting about him, a little bit also is ecology. Felix published very interesting things, three ecologies and so forth, and they wanted during the period to introduce into the ecological discussions, the political discussion about ecology, a kind of ecology that's not based on simply nature and machine, but instead these assemblages in which the people exist together. How can we maybe a rhizomatic ordering of ecology? Right, exactly. On the planet. You know, I must say that my aspiration when we chose that fund, I got excited because the meeting and everybody that looked at the title was, oh, this is interesting. The last semester, the last week we did polychrome. Polychrome is interesting, but it's like one idea
They produce beautiful. Incredible ideas of reflecting color and beautiful. I mean, this studio is much more difficult. Because it's almost impossible to rise up to the title. So I feel a little bit embarrassed that I don't feel like, if you go back and look at what we did with Polycom, what the projects were, they're more successful in a sense that the title, and anyway, and doing something in 3.5 weeks is ridiculous, it's too short. But I kind of feel responsible for the fact that this studio doesn't equal the title, and it's just impossible to title that way. And I feel like what I should have done is assign 1,000 titles. By assigning 1,000 titles, read that book, get what you can out of it, and try to do something in a rhythmatic word. Then you could have had maybe a result. But
I thought, like I said, you also said was the lizards. This is most important book. The lizard itself.
What about Watery?
Pottery as well. They, eventually went on different paths.
They must go on top of it.
For a minor literature.
It's a very thin book on top.
Yeah, so there's major and minor languages, it's a very interesting, book in Kafka style. As you know, Kafka living in Prague, and so, in Prague, it's a multilingual, at that time, the Jewish community more exists in Prague, where there's many different languages, and so and Kafka is very friendly with the person who ended up preserving Kafka archives and taking it to Jerusalem. And so in a letter to this person, Kafka said, "I can't speak in German, I can't speak in Yiddish, I can't speak Czech, and I can't not." And that's the phrase that led to the idea of a minor language. What is it to speak a foreign language in a language? That's the problem that they derive from Kafka himself in this formation. And so the major languages and minor languages, hegemonic languages, and minor languages, that's important. They also wrote together a book on what is philosophy.
I didn't saw that.
Yeah, it's the last book. I think it was mostly written by the Lord. Felix very sick, and
So in your long dialogue with all these French philosophers, my view was Derrida was not as important as Deleuze at all. And my feeling that he was over projected or something, he was over celebrated by the deconstructivists and Peter and Rajchman getting into blackness and all that. And I thought it was overblown. I really personally am completely against Derrida. And I said, developed neurological tests based on talking, right? And the question of the perception, I booked in 1993. I was like completely against what happened with Derrida being used by the architects to do this sort of, twisted whatever. And to me, I read some Derrida, but I thought it was just nonsense. I saw a lecture of his in 42nd Street in that auditorium of the New York University, where in the middle of the lecture, there was another microphone, there was another text being projected. Were you with that? There was another, and he claimed that he didn't know that was going on. There was another lecture going on, so you couldn't understand what he was saying. It was like a demonstration of the baloney that he was projecting, and it was a real life experience. I to this day, I don't know, nobody ever said, was that a hoax? Or was there really a mix up in the audio linkages that caused that to other lecture intersectors? You didn't see that.
No, but it's true that, when I was enlisted by Peter, who participated in these things, I said to myself, I didn't like the deconstructivist group. There was a group of people that had been created. Mark Woodley was part of it,
Phil Johnson,
Bill Johnson.
Phil Johnson and Mark Lee created.
Exactly.
And they left out Bernard.
They left out Bernard.
And he leaded and did, kind of cartwheels and then they included. And Frank Gehry didn't want to be included because he decided, I don't know what the hell this is.
No,
They needed him in order to make their case.
yeah. So anyway, when I was driving, I think that had your attitude. Yes, there's something interesting in the area, but more interesting is the two, and there was I'd say, in the board of any of that, over the old people that liked the area, and these new people, including Greg himself, who saw in this something interesting that they could develop that wasn't like the deconstructivist architecture. I know Ross Krauss also, because I was a long time worked with them. For the Journal of October that was housed in Institute of Architecture there. She hated the show.
She never wrote a criticism of it.
No, she sent me a thing with, or I participated, I guess, in something, and I said to her, you know, this is really interesting, it's part of the history of what went on there. Well, I have it, it's her actual remarks. So she said, my idea is Gordon Mallory. That's what I think is deconstruction and not reconstructive architecture. And she, Gordon Mallory, of course, really just spoke about an architecture and everything that went on with all of that.
But they were very much, Clark was very much against everything that was going on in the Institute.
Absolutely, yeah.
And 8 West 40th Street was at the top floor of the Rhinebeck building. Andrew McNair was the director of programs. And they were gonna let Gordon Clark and who else was with them, I forgot, to adjust they're gonna have an exhibition. They had an exhibition space there. So and Andrew was there saying, you want to come up there at 8 o'clock on the night? And they came up there and shot out all the windows.
Yeah, I remember.
That was their exhibition. That's deconstruction.
Yeah, that's Ross Krauss, like you.
Going on thought.
Anyway, yes, no, it's great. All these people, it was a long and rich period. And I was fortunate to get to know people and participate in
I think rich period now, I feel that what we're doing, I think when we go and look at this Peter Holland show, it's really amazing to me. He went into teach, have they been over here? You haven't? You just oh, you didn't see. We have a show up the T space, we've got to see. And I invited Peter Holland, who's been doing, you know, I knew his work. He became very famous in the mid-80s, soon these Dable color, electron color of almost like electric circuits. And right in that time where there was, you know, reintroduced painting, culture, against conceptual art moment. So it was a very enlightened moment. And then he kind of, you know, became a teacher, teaching philosophy of art at Yale. And I saw an article in the New York Times about his connection to philosophy and really little philosophy and everything. I said, let's invite him to see what he would do to teach me. So he came, and then he did something which, you know, I was surprised. He didn't use any April colors. He decided to take a proportion of cheesecake, which is all made out of golden sections. Everybody knows what a golden section is. That joint to that joint to that joint is 1.618. The whole cheesecake is squares and golden sections, the whole geometry of the inside. Anyway, then he found these relationships and then he invited his students and I forget her name, to do these small totems rising up from the floor. So it's absolutely mesmerizing space. So taking, making color, play the kind of song to the geometry and letting her pieces kind of dominate in a very fragile way in the whole relationship. So in my mind, which is, I just gave a lecture in Rome on the 27th of June, right? I was supposed to be giving about this thing. And I gave this kind of polemical lecture, art drives architecture. In my mind, we're in a moment where the relationship between music, art, and architecture can be seen as something rhizomatic or, related, so I don't think, in my mind, we're in the new time, and I'm so thankful for Kamala Harris that makes me feel there's hope. Right, but we're not going back.
I should have,
Can you really buy a t-shirt? We're not going back.
yeah, you can buy it. There's an added word, yeah, you can see it, you can buy it.
Maddie, would you please give me an extra large?
Work on it.
But I think, what you're doing here is very much in the spirit of.
Yeah, it's like Black Mountain,
Yeah, exactly, it's
It's
a
a small group of people.
Exactly.
And we had Nathaniel Kahn, the son of Luke Kahn, was on our final jury. He had an amazing critique, right? Wasn't he good? He was like into it, right? And, he's like, and I hope to get him out here. He's never been at T-Space, but there's a guy that's exploring deep sky. He's excited about what the James Webb Telescope has shown us, and this deep sky movie that he made is absolutely enormously interesting for its optimistic projection of what's going on today. So the boundaries between art and science are blurred. There's another correlation, right? They're blurred. So yeah, that's kind of excitement that I see in this moment. So I don't quite disagree, but I question whether that period is over. But there's always another period on the horizon. There's always another person or another generation born. There's always something, coming.
Yeah, it's great to have all of you, that are now taking part in this, because, my book was published in, this Stanley stuff in 1998, so probably none of you were born yet or something like that. And so you're coming in, you give us energy to think that there's now new ways of doing things, that you're going to take up all of this. So we're trying, or at least I'm trying to say a little bit what it was in a way that inspired you to do more. And of course, this space is absolutely exemplary of that.
You're also key to us understanding important texts like 1,000 Plateaus, right? I mean, it's not an easy book. I have a copy of it downstairs. You're welcome to take it to the exhibit house and read out loud to each other. It's very complicated. It's all underlined things that I thought were interesting in there. But yeah, it's not quite poetry, but it's not easy to read.
No, it's if you know the details of it, it's terribly complicated, terribly interesting, and yet, even if you don't know everything he's talking about, it nevertheless provokes, and nevertheless, you sort of enter into this and think, what is this? And so it was in French, incidentally, an illustrated book. So there's an image for each one of the plateaus. It's divided into plateaus. There's the first plateau is rhizome. So they're imagining that, and It's very interesting, the intersections with visual culture and music that.
Yes, absolutely. So I say, as an assignment, the graduating assignment is, we're gonna give you the certificate that you graduated, but you've got to read this book, right? Where are we doing the certificate?
Here.
Right here?
Yes.
Okay, let me go get the book.